Life stories. Don't make this mistake in court. What you need to know. Sophia Carter adjusted the collar of her blazer as she walked through the grand, looming halls of the Manhattan courthouse. The massive structure was a reminder of the weight of the legal system, its walls whispering of the power it held over people's lives. At 33, Sophia was still considered young for a lawyer in the competitive field of criminal defense, but she had worked hard to earn her place. This was the trial that would make or break her career, and she knew it. She glanced at the clock on the wall as it ticked down to the hour of the opening arguments. She had represented clients before, but none like this. The case she was handling was more than just a traffic violation. It was about racial justice, systemic inequality, and, most importantly, proving that her client, Mark Williams, deserved the same fairness as anyone else. Mark, a 30-year-old black man, had been charged with running a red light while rushing to help a customer whose car had broken down on the side of the highway. It seemed like a simple case at first, but the moment Mark was arrested, things became complicated. The officers involved had acted with a prejudice that had nothing to do with the facts. To them, Mark's skin color was enough to turn an ordinary traffic stop into an act of criminality. Sophia knew that in a city like New York, the intersection of race and the law was never a simple matter. She had seen it too many times in her career. Racial bias in the criminal justice system was real, and it was up to her to fight against it, to make sure that her client received a fair trial. Mark's story was one of urgency, not disregard for the law. He had been working at his auto repair shop in Brooklyn when he got a call about a customer's car that had broken down dangerously on the FDR Drive. The customer was stranded, and it wasn't just a minor breakdown. If left unresolved, it could cause a serious accident. Mark rushed to the scene, running the red light along the way. He was doing what anyone would do to protect a fellow human being in danger. But when the police arrived on the scene, they didn't see an emergency. They saw a black man breaking the law. Their attitudes were dismissive, condescending, and ultimately racially biased. Mark was arrested and charged, and Sophia was the one who would have to argue his case before a jury. The courtroom was packed. The atmosphere was tense as the judge entered, the room falling silent in an instant. Sophia stood, her palms slightly damp, but her mind focused and sharp. She had spent hours preparing for this moment, and now it was time to deliver. The judge, a woman in her mid-50s named Evelyn Thomas, glanced at the case files and then turned her attention to the prosecutor, Cameron Hayes. Cameron was a seasoned attorney known for his sharp wit and even sharper tactics. He had a reputation for being tough, but Sophia wasn't afraid of him. She had learned to stand her ground, no matter how intimidating the opponent. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Cameron began, his voice smooth and commanding. "This case is about accountability. The defendant, Mark Williams, broke the law by running a red light on the busy FDR Drive. His actions not only violated traffic laws, but put the safety of others at risk." Sophia could feel her blood pressure rise as he continued. Cameron was setting the tone, emphasizing how Mark's actions were reckless and endangering. He spoke with authority, pushing the narrative that Mark's actions were just another example of lawlessness that needed to be punished. Sophia's turn came next. She rose from her seat, taking a steadying breath before she walked up to the podium. She could hear the murmurs in the courtroom as she approached, people curious about the young black woman about to defend a black man in a trial that had racial undertones. "I stand before you today to ask for fairness," Sophia began, her voice calm but resolute. "My client, Mr. Mark Williams, did not run a red light because he has no regard for the law. He did so because he was trying to help someone in a situation of danger. His actions were not reckless. They were a response to an emergency, to save a life." She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in. "The law is there to protect us, but it should not be wielded as a tool to punish people who are simply trying to do the right thing. Mr. Williams is not a criminal, and I ask that you consider the context of his actions. He was rushing to help a person in need, and the consequences of his actions should not outweigh his intent. Sophia turned and addressed the jury, making sure to catch their eyes one by one. She knew the key was to make them see her client's humanity, not just as a defendant, but as a person who made a decision in a split second under pressure. She continued, "This case is not just about a traffic violation. It's about fairness. It's about looking at the bigger picture and understanding the true context of what happened that day. I ask you to consider this when you make your decision." As Sophia finished, she returned to her seat. She could feel the eyes of the jury on her, and she knew they were weighing her words carefully. It was a tough crowd, but she felt a sense of pride. She had made her case, and now it was up to them. The next day, things took an unexpected turn. The defense had called a witness to testify, a traffic expert who would speak to the circumstances surrounding Mark's driving that day. Dr. Thomas Willard, a well-respected authority in traffic safety, had been called to explain how the situation could have been handled differently. Dr. Willard was a middle-aged white man with graying hair and a well-tailored suit. When he spoke, his voice was authoritative, but there was something in the way he presented himself that made Sophia uneasy. He had an air of superiority, an undertone that seemed dismissive, especially when he began discussing the behavior of black drivers. "I've studied traffic patterns for over 20 years," Dr. Willard said, "and I can tell you that, more often than not, people who break traffic laws in the way Mr. Williams did are often in a rush because they think the rules don't apply to them." Sophia felt her chest tighten. She knew exactly what he was implying, and it had nothing to do with the facts of the case. The racial bias in his statement was clear. It was an assumption that all black people, especially black men, had a sense of entitlement and disregard for the law. She stood up, her voice shaking with anger but controlled. "Objection, Your Honor," she called out. "This witness is speaking to generalizations about a group of people, not facts relevant to the case. His testimony is not based on any real evidence of Mr. Williams' intent." Judge Thomas turned her gaze to Dr. Willard, giving him a disapproving look. The jury, too, seemed to notice the shift in tone, though Sophia knew the damage had already been done. The seed of doubt had been planted. It was then that Sophia made the mistake she feared most. In the heat of the moment, after the biased remarks from Dr. Willard and the prosecutor's relentless questioning, Sophia lost her composure. Her emotions got the best of her as she snapped at the witness. "How dare you make assumptions about my client based on the color of his skin?" she shouted, her voice rising. The courtroom fell silent. Sophia's outburst echoed through the chamber, and for a brief moment, she felt the weight of her error. She had let her emotions cloud her judgment, and now, she feared, the jury would see her as the angry black lawyer who couldn't control herself. Cameron Hayes wasted no time in exploiting her slip-up. "Your Honor," he said, "it's clear that the defense is becoming emotional and losing control. How can we trust the argument of a lawyer who can't even control her temper in a courtroom?" Sophia sank into her chair, knowing that she had just given Cameron a powerful weapon. She had let the pressure get to her, and now the jury might see her as unprofessional and unprepared. The days following her outburst were a blur. Sophia knew she had made a mistake, but she wasn't going to let it define her. She couldn't undo what had happened, but she could learn from it and move forward. The jury's perception of her had been altered, and now it was up to her to regain their trust. As closing arguments approached, Sophia spent the night revising her notes, reminding herself that she had to stay calm, stay focused, and deliver her argument with precision. This was her chance to turn the tide. When it was her turn to speak, she stood up, taking a deep breath before she addressed the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice steady and calm. "I know I made a mistake earlier in this trial. I let my emotions get the best of me, and for that, I apologize. But I want you to know this. I am here because I believe in my client's innocence, and I believe in the justice of this case." Sophia paused, giving the jury a moment to absorb her words. "I ask for fairness," she continued, "because that's all Mr. Williams is asking for. He is not a criminal. He is not a man who deserves to be treated with disrespect. He was simply trying to help someone in need." Sophia finished her argument with a powerful statement. "I ask you to look beyond the bias, beyond the assumptions, and see the truth of this case. That is all we are asking for: justice and the truth." The jury deliberated for hours. It felt like an eternity to Sophia. She had presented her case, had faced challenges, and had made mistakes, but now all she could do was wait. Finally, the jury returned with their verdict. As the foreman stood and spoke, Sophia held her breath. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Mark Williams, guilty of a traffic violation, but we recommend a reduced fine of $250 and no additional penalties." It wasn't a total victory, but it was a fair one. Mark had been held accountable, but his punishment was far less severe than the maximum penalties he could have faced. Sophia stood next to Mark as they left the courtroom, both exhausted but relieved. The battle had been hard fought, but they had made it through. Sophia knew that this case wasn't just about one man's fate. It was about a bigger fight for fairness in a system that too often turned a blind eye to racial inequality. As she walked out of the courthouse, Sophia felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had made her mark as a lawyer, and more importantly, she had fought for something bigger than herself. She knew that this was just one chapter in a much longer story. The fight for justice would continue, and she would be there every step of the way. The next morning, as Sophia sipped her coffee in her small, cluttered apartment in Brooklyn, she reflected on everything that had transpired over the last few days. The weight of the trial was still heavy on her shoulders, but she also felt a sense of pride. Mark had been given a lighter sentence than he could have received, and that, in itself, felt like a small victory. Sophia had been through many cases in her short career, but none had impacted her so deeply. The racial bias in the courtroom, the way Mark had been treated as if his life didn't matter, was something she had witnessed all too often in her community. Yet, for the first time, she felt like she had stood her ground. She wasn't just a lawyer, she was someone fighting against a system that was designed to keep people like Mark down. As she looked at the stacks of legal books and case files piled on her desk, she couldn't help but think about her own journey. She had grown up in a working-class neighborhood in Harlem, where she was no stranger to injustice. Her parents had always pushed her to do well in school, telling her that education was her way out. They'd faced their own battles with racism, her father being a construction worker and her mother a nurse. They had always done their best to teach her about the importance of standing up for what was right, even when the world around you made it hard. Sophia had fought to get into one of the most prestigious law schools in the country, navigating not only the rigorous academic challenges, but also the personal biases that came with being a black woman in a predominantly white field. Every day had been a struggle to prove that she belonged, that she could succeed without compromising who she was. She had become a lawyer to make a difference, to fight for the people who didn't have the voice or resources to stand up for themselves. And although her emotions had sometimes clouded her judgment in the courtroom, the ultimate lesson was that her passion for justice was what made her a good lawyer. It wasn't the legal textbooks or strategies, it was her heart. Back at the courthouse, the aftermath of the trial was just as tense. The legal community buzzed with talk of the case. The verdict had been handed down, but the public perception was divided. Some felt that Mark had gotten off easy. Others believed that Sophia had made a compelling argument. But there was a significant undercurrent of doubt, especially from those who felt that the system didn't do enough to hold people accountable. Sophia had received messages from colleagues, some congratulating her on a job well done, others questioning her decisions. But it was the message from her former professor, Professor Langley, that stuck with her. "Dear Sophia," the email began, "I'm glad to see you're sticking to your principles, but be mindful of your position. You may have won a small battle here, but the war is much larger. You've made a statement, but it's important to remember how the legal system can often work against you, no matter how good your argument is. Stay focused, stay prepared. Sophia closed her laptop and exhaled slowly. She knew Langley was right. The system was not going to change overnight. But that didn't mean she could stop trying. If anything, the trial had shown her just how much work there was to do. That afternoon, Mark called her. His voice was steady, but she could hear the gratitude in his tone. "Sophia, I just wanted to thank you again. You saved my business, and you gave me hope," he said. "I know I didn't get off scot-free, but you gave me a chance to move on. I can keep my shop open, and I can keep my head high. That means everything to me." Sophia smiled, feeling a wave of relief. "You deserve it, Mark. You didn't deserve to be treated like that. And you didn't deserve the full weight of the law for a simple mistake. I just wish it could have been different." Mark paused for a moment. I know. But I'm grateful for everything you did, and I'm going to make sure I don't let this mistake define me." Sophia's heart lifted as she hung up the phone. This was why she did what she did. For moments like this. For people like Mark, who just needed someone to stand by them, to believe in them, and to give them a fair shot.
In the weeks that followed, Sophia found herself busier than ever. More clients, more cases, and more battles to fight. But there was something different now, an understanding that she could no longer ignore the racial dynamics that played a role in so many of her cases. She had been privileged to go through the best schools, to get the best education, but many of her clients had not had that same luxury. They were judged by the color of their skin before they were even given a chance. One afternoon, Sophia sat down with an old friend, Lena, at a local cafe in Harlem. Lena had been with her throughout law school, and they'd shared many late-night study sessions. They both knew how hard it was to break into a world that didn't want them there. "So, how's it been, really?" Lena asked, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "I know the case with Mark was tough, but how are you holding up?" Sophia sighed, leaning back in her chair. "It's been overwhelming, Lena. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. This case wasn't just about Mark. It was about every single Black person who's been mistreated by the system. Every time I step into that courtroom, I feel like I'm carrying the weight of all those injustices. I know I did what I could for Mark, but what about the others?" Lena nodded, her face serious. "I know exactly what you mean. We're in a system that's not built for us. But you're doing something that not many people can do. You're speaking up. You're challenging it. And that's more than most people ever do." Sophia thought about Lena's words. She knew the road ahead was going to be difficult, but she also knew that it was worth fighting for. She wasn't just representing Mark anymore. She was representing a whole community that had been silenced for far too long. "I have to keep fighting," Sophia said, her voice firm. "Because if I don't, who will?" Months later, Sophia stood in front of a crowded courtroom once again. This time, the stakes were even higher. A new case had come across her desk, a wrongful death suit involving a Black teenager who had been shot by police officers under questionable circumstances. The media had sensationalized the case, and public opinion was polarized. Sophia knew that this would be the most challenging case of her career. As she prepared for the trial, Sophia couldn't shake the thought of Mark. She thought about how far he had come since the verdict in his case. She remembered his words, "I'm not going to let this define me." Sophia realized that this was true for everyone, not just Mark. They were all fighting against forces bigger than themselves. But as long as they stood up, as long as they didn't let the system break them, they could make a difference. She took a deep breath as she walked into the courtroom. This was it, the case that would test everything she had learned, everything she had fought for, and she was ready. The journey of a lawyer, especially one like Sophia Carter, is never easy. It's filled with challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt.
But in the end, it is also filled with moments of triumph, moments where justice is served, where a life is changed, and where the fight for equality continues. Sophia had started her career with a desire to make a difference. She had learned the hard way that the legal system wasn't always fair, that racism could seep into every corner of it, and that the fight for equality would never be over. But she had also learned that one voice, one person, could make a difference. For Sophia, the journey was just beginning. The road ahead was long, but with every case she took on, with every victory, small or large, she knew she was inching closer to the change she wanted to see. And in her heart, she knew one thing for sure: she would never stop fighting for justice. The story of Sophia Carter's journey in the courtroom offers important life lessons about resilience, responsibility, and the power of standing up for what's right. It reminds us that mistakes, both personal and professional, are inevitable, but they don't define who we are. What truly matters is how we respond to them, whether we own up to them, learn from them, and continue to fight for fairness and justice. The story also highlights the impact of systemic inequalities, emphasizing the importance of being aware of bias and prejudice in our surroundings. Just as Sophia navigates her personal and professional challenges, we are reminded that the fight for equality is ongoing. It's not just about individual victories, but about creating a more just world for everyone. The narrative teaches us the importance of maintaining our integrity, speaking out against injustice, and recognizing the human story behind every legal case or societal issue. Life stories, like those of Sophia and Mark, serve as a call to action, showing us that each step we toward justice matters, no matter how difficult the path may seem. If you found this video helpful or thought-provoking, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It really helps more people discover our content. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest updates from our channel. Thanks for watching. We will see you in the next videos.